Brandon Sanderson's The Rhythm of War. This is the fourth book in the Stormlight Archive series. 1,219 pages and 117 chapters. This is a huge book that is well worth the effort. It took me a couple of months to finish it. And really, what it boils down to is two sides struggling with why they're fighting each other. And you've got the humans on one side and the Parshandi on the other, called singers or listeners. There's, divisions among the humans and among the listeners and the singers. So they're not all, automaton stormtroopers. It is, a blend of both populations. So the four main characters, it was really like there was kind of like competing storylines, but the main ones were them versus themselves. So of the four main characters, Dalinar, being the general and overall commander of forces, was of course fighting the quote-unquote enemy, but also was dealing with himself and growing as a bondsmith and his powers, his radiant powers. Shallen, of course, has always had a lot of issues, and she was formerly my favorite character. I liked her through the first two and even most of the third, but Drazana, I think, took over the top spot of my favorite character. Anyways, Shallen, of course, has a lot of internal issues with her split personalities and avoiding her past issues. So, of course, she's battling herself, but also working for / against the Ghost Bloods. Like, she wants information from them, that group, and they agree to give it to her in exchange for her completing a mission. So there's Caledon. Of course, he is the High Marshal, not a commander. Well, yeah, pretty much a commander, battle commander or company lord. He, of course, is fighting the enemy and also dealing with battle shock himself. So I liked that. That was one of the things I really liked about this book, is the mental side of it and Caledon dealing with those issues. Venali, who is titled The Last Listener, she is the one who we go about the flashbacks. In this book, you see the past through her eyes. And of course, she's fighting the enemy, which is, from her perspective, would be the humans, but also dealing with how she started this and her whole mess with her family and how she walked away from her family and all that stuff. So she's dealing with her own issues. And even if you could even say there's a fifth main character in Navani, and she, of course, is dealing with, the struggles with the tower. She's queen, and she, has the day-to-day responsibilities in the tower, but also, like, she wants to be a scholar. She's always claimed to be an intellectual and a scholar, and she really, questions herself, and she gets the opportunity to try it out. And so that is another thing I liked about this book. So the humans, they have some people are radiant and they pretty much have superpowers, but officially called surge binding. So this is across all beings that we know of in Roshar can access surge binding by walking the path and by saying the words and living a positive life for others and following the path. So radiants are humans who use stormlight. Fused are the listeners who use void light. So there's like an alternative. It's not all only available to humans, but yes, surge binding. So you get Spren when that. So you kind of have like an invisible friend, for lack of a better word, and they are part of that bond is the power of surge binding and the ability to do that. But really, it is available to everyone, which I thought was really neat and a real cool dynamic of this story. Of course, there's the tower. Most of the book is set in the tower and the interactions of the tower. So really neat there. And the sibling is the Spren for the tower. So there's another added dynamic there. My favorite characters kind of grew and evolved over time. The first two books, it was Shallen by far. And then the third book, it was kind of between Shallen and Drazana. And then now that Drazana's queen absolutely, she is my, favorite character. Um, Along the way, everybody kind of said each of the main characters said to themselves, like, what would Jazana do in this situation? So, like, just the way that other characters perceive her and the fact that she's, queen and has the coolest powers and was first to say the fourth ideal, she's just by far my favorite character. Wit is also pretty cool. Rock and Syl, which is Kaladin's friend. So those are all my favorite characters for different reasons. I was kind of bummed that Rock wasn't in this book as much. He's there briefly at the beginning, but yeah, they reference him a few times. So Navani is probably the fifth character. She's a major focus. She is in the tower the whole time, so she's the one that's royalty that's quote unquote left behind, and well, everybody else goes off to war. So I guess Caledon is too. So there's a few main characters in the tower. Yeah, things I liked. Adolin, Shallen's betrothed, their relationship growing was cool. Their awkwardness was cool. But I really liked Adolin. He kind of grew on me. Like, I didn't like him to begin with, but the end of the last book and more into this one, the fourth one, he means more. He's more interesting than he used to be, I guess, is part of it, but also he's cooler. Like, he gets injured and then he's like, oh, I can't heal by Stormlight, just like the rest of my life, right? Just because other people have superpowers doesn't mean I need them. And I think that, to me, is what elevated him in my eyes. I already talked about Kaladin's struggle with battle shock. Like, there's a cost to war, and a lot of times in fantasy it's just all these machines and these people, they are just stormtroopers. They go and they wipe everything out and have no feelings. Kaladin's struggle to me was really cool, and I really liked that. Navani's struggle, she's struggling with her people, but also like being a scholar. Her internal struggle is, I'm in charge as the queen. I have a bunch of maintenance responsibilities that get in the way, but am I really a scholar, or do I just pretend to be? And she gets a chance because she gets captured and locked away, and the enemy says, hey, research this stuff for me. So she really gets a chance to find out whether she's a scholar or not. I really liked that whole scene, scenario, all that. And also the flying fabrials. So at the beginning, there's like a floating air platform that they use for an invasion or a rescue operation, and it can only go in one direction at a time, up and down or side to side, not both at the same time. So really, like, it is a really cool technology, but there's a cost to it. You have to have the weights moving somewhere, and you can't move in multiple directions. So again, the cost, that brought it home for me. It's not some, superpower weapon. It is, a weapon with cost. I liked that the fused only had one surge. I think there's something to that that'll come in later, like something with, the intruders needing to work together because the humans share surges, like building together, whereas the fused, were the original, so they only get one, or some kind of thing. I think that's going to come into play later, but I did like that there. The last thing I liked was the sibling being separate from the Oath Gates. Up till now, they kind of talked about the tower and the Oath Gates as like one entity, and I mean, you visit the Spren when you go into Shadesmar, the cognitive realm where Spren live, the version of Roshar. So it was mentioned in the past, but it really was brought home here, and I enjoyed that. There were some things that I disliked, and the first one is really easy to do. I did not like the Ford. The Ford was good, everything was great about it, but my expectations, I kind of thought this was going to be the end or close to the end of the series, but reading the forward, Brandon Sanderson envisions this as 10 books in the series, 2 sets of 5, and these are not short books, so that I kind of got a little bit discouraged in that I was just starting the book, and oh, here's thousands more pages. It's going to be a blast. I'm going to enjoy it, but man, it took a lot. So this is a big one. And the other thing that I didn't like was there's a lot of reveals in the last book. I split into 4 books here, and towards the end, they start doing a bunch of reveals at the end of chapters. And in the forward, it said, when I first imagined this whole series, there was a scene that I pictured the author saying that's at the end of this book. And to me, I was like, oh man, this has got to be it. This has got to be it. And so like every reveal, I was like, this has got to be it. And it just kept, like, each reveal was bigger and bigger. So that kind of added to the anticipation, and I was a little excited, bummed, whatever you want to call it, but it just kind of like, it took me away from the book a little bit when I read that, and kept like expecting there to be the scene, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. So kind of strange, but that's just my own way of thinking about the book. The Regals, which there were singers, Regals, and then Fused, it almost seemed like they needed like a middle authority group figure, which it makes sense. It just kind of seemed almost like an afterthought. So not a big deal. It just, I don't know, it just bothered me a little. I struggle when any fiction or media starts talking about aliens. I kind of start thinking like jumping the shark territory. And I was kind of worried about this here. It's hinted at in previous books that Roshar isn't the only planet. You know, there is others. And so I'm not worried about it yet, but I could see it easily becoming something. Odium's goal was always to win the war here and then move on to another system. So we'll see how that plays out, but I'll keep my eye on it. Real quick, I got some quotes. This one here, confusion can mean you have realized your weaknesses. I forget the value sometimes. Yes, it can lead to paralysis, but also to truth and understanding. We imagine that great people were always great and never questioning. Yeah, that stood out to me. Like, there's nothing wrong with admitting weaknesses, and yeah, being confused is part of growing. So I thought that was pretty telling. Yep. This one here is Dalinar talking to Syl about Caledon. Every soldier reaches a point where he has to set down his sword. Part of the commander's job is to watch for the signs. So there is growth past, being a soldier, but also like life after being a soldier. I thought that was pretty cool. Yep, this is Caledon. I'm not sure who he's talking to, maybe Syl, but he took a deep breath, then strode forward. He could at least act confident. Hav's first rule of leadership drilled into Caledon on his first day as a squad leader. Once you make a decision, commit to it. So there were a ton of quotes in this book, but those were the ones that stood out the most to me and really cool. This is a new book. I got it as a gift from my parents, so that's why it looks really nice, but it still took me a couple months to finish it. So remember to buy your books used, and see you next time.